Hey guys, it's Penguin here, and welcome back to another gold making video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about 5 things that you need to modify in your TSM, especially if you're a beginner, to make sure that you are not accidentally losing gold or not making profit. So basically, I've made a previous video kind of similar to this topic about some beginner mistakes and stuff like that. However, I wanted to update you and show you and exactly walk through each step that you should do right whenever you start using TSM. I thought this would be a perfect video to make, as about a week ago I made a video regarding how to make enough gold to play the new expansion for free, and I've seen a lot of new people join the Discord and the community as a whole, and of course, welcome to all of you. I hope you are enjoying gold making, and of course, let me know if you have any questions, but hopefully this video can serve you as a guide to just make sure you kind of get the basics down. So definitely watch through and make sure all of these changes you have applied to your TSM. Of course, as always, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel or leave a like if you enjoy the content. Of course, it's not required, but if you enjoy and want to see more, that's definitely something that you can do. But here is the first topic. Alright, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is making sure that TSM is taking into account the auction house cut. So if you guys don't know, whenever you sell something on the auction house or Blizz takes a 5% cut off of that sale. To put it in simple terms, let's say you sold an item for 100 gold. Whenever that item actually went into your mailbox, you would only be receiving 95 gold, not 100, because of that 5% cut. And depending on whenever you installed TSM, your default settings may look slightly different. The TSM devs actually implemented this in by default a few months ago. However, if you are somebody like me who have had the add-on for years or months before that, then you probably do not have this change unless you've already done it yourself. Either way, it's always good to double check. So what you guys will need to do is open up your general TSM settings, which is just /TSM, go to settings, and then go to crafting. From here, you will see your default price methods, and the one we're going to be talking about is the craft value. Basically, this is how TSM values the crafted items. And so, depending on your TSM version, this right here, this times 0.95, may be missing. And this is basically taking into account that 5% cut. So, going back to that previous example, without this right there, TSM, if there is an item that is selling for 100 gold, then TSM, this default value would be 100 gold, and it will be using that to determine profit. However, by resetting it to default, aka adding in that 0.95, that means that if it's currently on sale for 100 gold, TSM will use 95 gold in order to calculate profit because it's already taking into account that 5% cut. So hopefully that makes sense. Of course, if you guys are a little bit confused with these crafting methods and what exactly they mean, I highly recommend checking out my crafting TSM in-depth guide. That will give you the most information needed. But just in short form, just make sure that this is added right there in that default craft value. The next thing that we're going to be talking about is also related to crafting, and this is going to be your TSM sources. So in order to look at this, you are going to want to open up any sort of crafting profession. If you are on a character that has no professions, you can do /TSM crafting in chat. And as you can see, it will open up the blank menu. Does not matter what profession, does not matter if it's this menu, you just need it pulled up. Afterwards, you can change it to gathering, and you will see a set of sources right there. By default, if you have not messed with these, yours probably looks a little bit different. And the biggest thing that we're going to change is you probably have a craft unprofitable set in the source, and you're going to want to remove it from that list. Basically, that saying is it's normally at the end, And so what that's saying is, if you need this crafted, worst comes to worst, you're going to craft it unprofitable. And nobody wants to do that because even if it's an, intermediate item that you need, crafting it unprofitable could turn the whole item unprofitable, and then TSM is basically just losing you gold. So you never want to craft something that is not going to make you gold or save you gold, so you're going to remove that from the list. Afterwards, you're going to notice that I have auction house crafting below the craft profitable, but above the auction house. And what this does is take into account intermediate crafting steps. And I personally think the best example of this would be heavy desolate armor kits. And so, as you guys know, if you are somebody who wants to craft heavy desolate armor kits, let's see if I can get them queued up. There we go. You need heavy desolate leather. So if I wanted to craft 44, I would need 352 desolate or heavy desolate leather. And technically, I can craft heavy desolate with normal desolate. It takes 10 of the standard leather to make one of the heavy version. And so, what this auction house crafting will do is evaluate if it's cheaper and saves you gold from taking that extra step and turning normal desolate into heavy desolate. And that is just one example of why you want to use that intermediate step. Another example is if you are a legendary crafter or wants to do legendaries at all, you have the enchanted materials. So you have the enchanted lightless silk, the enchanted heavy, all of that. And so if you want TSM to recognize that you can actually craft that item cheaper than just buying it off the auction house, you're going to want to add in auction house crafting. Now, of course, there is this one that's optional. You can add in auction house disenchanting. And what this will do is, if it finds something like a piece of gear that you can actually buy and disenchant to get that material cheaper, it will also tell you to do that. Personally, I don't like to use it because it takes a lot of time. Just because, if it's going to save me 2 gold, I just want to buy the real thing, I don't want to sit here and disenchant a ton of stuff, but it comes down to personal preference. Now, the next thing that we're going to be talking about is crafting as well, and honestly, 4 out of these 5 things, well, to be honest, everything is related to crafting with this video, but the third one is going to be hard coding your vendor prices. Now, what I mean by this is, by default, TSM will evaluate items based off of that method that we looked at earlier. So in order to tell how much a material cost, it will use this string right here. So whenever it's evaluating, let's say something like, do I have penumbra thread in my inventory? I do not, but something like penumbra thread, oh, yes I do, there we go. Something like penumbra thread, I can buy this at a vendor for 7.2 gold. And so that 7.2 gold is considered the vendor buy price, which is a variable. Now the issue is, by default, every time the WoW client updates, every time you get that 5-second update in your launcher, anything like that, and then you log into the game and it says that TSM is currently restoring its cache, that sort of message, and it lags your game a lot. Whenever you get that, TSM forgets its variables. So every time that happens, and it happens pretty often, this vendor buy variable is back to being null. It's back to being invalid and just nothing. And so it stays like that until you go back to that vendor, open it up, and it's oh yeah, penumbra thread cost 7.2 gold. And normally, this is not that big of a deal, as we always visit those vendors pretty often. However, there is one item, which if you guys are a long-term user, you probably know exactly what I'm about to say. But curing salt is a vendor item, which is in its kind of own vendor that nobody really ever actually visits unless you run out of curing salt. And that causes issues because TSM forgets its vendor price. You don't go to that vendor, you try to craft something, and all of a sudden it's saying that curing salt cost 10,000 gold each, which is obviously not the case. So in long term, the thing that you're going to want to do is hard code those prices. Now, it might take you 3 to 4 minutes to do this, and that's not any time at all, but you only have to do it once, and then you're good to go. How you will do this is yet again open up any of your crafting menus, go to Reports, go to Materials, and then you're going to want to find your materials. So for example, you can look up Penumbra Thread, click on this, and as you can see, I have already set it. If I revert it back to default, you will probably see something like this. You're going to want to erase it, and because I have reputation, I can set this to 7 gold and 20 silver. However, if you're somebody who does not have reputation, you can set that to 9 gold. So go ahead and do this with Curing Salt, go ahead and do it with Arboreal Shards, everything that you can get from the vendor, go ahead and take some time to do this. This will make sure that TSM always uses the correct pricing, and you don't have to worry about it in the long run. Now, the next one that we're going to be doing is a suggestion. So this is going to be more of a think about doing this, and you don't have to do this. And this is incorporating smart average buy into your price sources. So previously, I just showed you how TSM values materials, and there is a variable which you can add called smart average buy. And so what this means and what the difference is if you hover over an item that you have a lot of, as you can see right under purchase, you will see that smart average buy price, which is currently 21 gold for me. So I currently own 5,380 lightless silk, and my average purchase price of that amount, the amount that I currently own, is 21 gold. Now, by default, TSM will use the market value or DB market value of that item, which, as you can see, market value is actually 25 gold. So if we were to go here and look up lightless silk, right now I have smart average buy added into this, and of course it will take the minimum of any of these values, and since that 21 gold is less than that 25 gold, it will use that smart average buy, making my price actually 21 gold. If we are to reset this back to default, you can see it is now using that market value price of 25. So adding this in to specific items that you can buy a ton of whenever it's cheap, whenever you stockpile items, you can ensure that TSM is using a correct value. Now, 21 versus 25 gold is not a huge deal. However, if you're talking something about, this one's a pretty big deal. Right now, the protofiber, I have my average smart buy for 58 gold. If I didn't use my smart average buy, my market value is at 66 gold, which, that's a pretty big difference, especially when you need a ton per craft. That 8 gold difference times 100, that's an 800 gold difference, which can be a big deal. So if this is something that you want to add, like I just kind of showed you, you can add it in on a per item basis, which is what I do. I basically add it into any kind of Shadowlands item that I overstock. Or if you want to set it so everything and anything will use that, you can go back here and add it in right there in your default method. I personally don't do this as I don't really stockpile much for super cheap besides certain things. However, it's just personally up to you. And lastly, this comes to our final tip. And of course, if you are overwhelmed, feel free to rewatch any of these specific tips. They all are independent of one each other, so don't feel like you have to do everything at once. But this last tip is understanding the grouping settings. So TSM currently has 3 different group settings that you can use whenever you're trying to add items to a group. Now, these really only kind of apply to Shadowlands things. Some of these are good for Old World, but this really applies to kind of current content. And what I mean by this is depending on the type of item you're trying to group, you are going to have to use a different setting. So to sum this up for you, specific item includes every single random stat, every single thing about that item is recorded. So if it's a you know how there's transmog pieces that are like blah 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 of the quick blade, anything like that that has bonus stats, etc. That is recorded whenever you are using specific item. Item level will keep the specific item level, however, it will make that the bonus stats are randomized. An example of item level is this right here. As you can see, it takes the exact item level of 87. However, the bonus stat has turned into a random stat 1 instead of something like crit or something specific. Then you have base item, which will simply use the basic version of that item. So no random stats, no specific item level, it will just be the base item that is in the game. And so you want to use these differently depending on what you're trying to group. Standardly, any sort of material, any sort of any item, you're going to want to use specific item. If you are trying to group current content crafter's marks items as well as legendaries, you're going to want to use item level. And lastly, if you are trying to group transmog, as in old world transmog that you farmed up from, dungeons, you're going to want to use base item. And that is kind of just the 3 rules of thumb that you want to consider whenever you're grouping. Now, one big thing to note is that, as you can see, this applies to ungrouped items. So if you are somebody who has accidentally put all of your crafter's marks gear when using a specific item, changing this does nothing to this over here. So you will have to remove all from the group, delete the group itself, remake it, change this setting, and then re-add them. So this only applies to the ungrouped column, not the already grouped column. So that is just one thing to take into note. And of course, just a quick shout out, if you guys do join the Discord, you can download this exact version. It's a free profile for TSM made for beginners. So of course, if you're looking for something to kind of model yours based off of, anything like that, you can find it in the Discord. But yeah, guys, that is basically it. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully these 5 tips can help you out, especially when you're first starting TSM. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a good day.